The Middle Ages are often portrayed as a time of knights, castles, and heroic battles. But beneath the surface of familiar stories lies a stranger world, a world where animals could be put on trial, where the stars determined whether a doctor would treat you, and where professional toilet inspectors had more political influence than some nobles. These medieval facts sound completely unbelievable, the kind of thing you'd expect from fantasy fiction. But every single one of them is absolutely real. So today, we're diving deep into 10 medieval facts that sound fake, but are actually true. And believe me, number 7 will change the way you imagine medieval life forever. Let's step back in time and uncover the truth behind the myths. 1. Animals were literally put on trial. Imagine this: a courtroom filled with stern officials, a judge in full robes, a crowd of villagers waiting anxiously, and in the center, the accused, a pig. As impossible as it sounds, medieval Europe held actual legal trials for animals. Pigs, goats, donkeys, even insects like weevils were summoned to court. They were assigned lawyers, given lengthy hearings, and sometimes even allowed appeals. One famous case involved a pig in 1386 that was dressed in a human outfit, gloves and all, and executed for harming a child. In another, a group of field mice was accused of destroying crops. Their lawyer argued that the mice were noble creatures, simply seeking food to survive. And yes, the court genuinely listened. But this wasn't just about mice and pigs. In 1474, a rooster was put on trial for the unnatural crime of laying an egg, something that was believed to be witchcraft or demonic influence. The rooster was found guilty and burned at the stake alongside its egg. Even more bizarre, entire communities of insects were sometimes excommunicated by the church. Locusts, caterpillars, and beetles that destroyed vineyards were formally cursed and banned from the land in religious ceremonies. To our modern minds, this sounds absurd. But to medieval society, the legal system applied to all of God's creatures. If humans could be judged, so could animals. The logic was rooted in their worldview. Animals had a place in the divine order, and if they disrupted that order, they had to face consequences just like any person would. It wasn't cruelty, it was cosmic justice. 2. The dead could accuse the living. Medieval Europe had a deep fear of divine judgment, and one of the strangest legal practices was known as beer right. If someone died under suspicious circumstances, their corpse was placed on a platform, and the suspected killer had to stand before it. The belief was simple. If the accused touched the dead body and it appeared to bleed, the person was deemed guilty. Of course, decomposition could cause fluids to seep, but medieval people saw it as a supernatural sign. This bizarre practice meant the dead literally testified against the living. It also prevented many people from even approaching the corpse. Fear alone was enough to prove guilt. The practice was so widespread that it appeared in legal codes across England, France, and Germany. Even Shakespeare referenced it in Richard III, showing how deeply embedded this belief was in European culture. Beer right wasn't just superstition, it was a form of trial by ordeal, where God himself was believed to reveal the truth through miraculous signs. And in a world where forensic science didn't exist, people relied on faith, fear, and the supernatural to find justice. 3. Doctors refused to treat patients until the stars were right. Medicine in the Middle Ages was closely linked to astrology. Physicians used what were called zodiac man charts, a diagram mapping parts of the body to the signs of the zodiac. For example, Aries ruled the head, Leo ruled the heart, Scorpio ruled the reproductive organs. If you needed surgery on a day when the moon was in the wrong zodiac sign, the doctor might refuse to treat you. Performing surgery at the wrong cosmic moment was believed to bring death. Medical students were taught to read horoscopes before diagnosing patients. So, in a sense, medieval medicine was a combination of astronomy, superstition, and rudimentary science, all guided by the stars. But it wasn't all mysticism. Medieval physicians actually made important advances in surgery, herbal medicine, and anatomy. They understood that timing mattered. Rest, diet, and environment all affected healing. They just believed the cosmos played a role too. Bloodletting, one of the most common treatments, was performed according to lunar cycles. Doctors believed that draining blood during a waxing moon would be more effective than during a waning moon. Universities like the one in Salerno, Italy, trained doctors to combine Greek medical texts with astrological charts, creating a system that lasted for centuries. So while it seems strange to us now, medieval doctors weren't ignoring medicine, they were simply trying to align it with the universe itself. 4. Castles had toilets, called garderobes, and people hung clothes in them. Medieval castles often had narrow vertical shafts, known as garderobes, which functioned as toilets. They were simple holes built into the outer castle wall, allowing waste to drop down the side. But here's the really weird part. People hung their clothes inside the garderobe. Why? They believed the foul smell would drive away fleas, moths, and other pests. And strangely enough, the ammonia in the air actually did help with that. Still, the idea of keeping your finest robes in the toilet chamber is one of the most bizarre yet practical medieval habits we know of. Garderobes were also strategic. In times of siege, enemies occasionally tried to climb up through the garderobe shafts to infiltrate the castle. This led to the installation of iron grates and defensive spikes. So not only were garderobes toilets and closets, they were also potential security risks. Some castles even had communal garderobes where multiple people used the same shaft. Privacy wasn't a medieval priority. 5. The king's toilet assistant was an elite political position. As unbelievable as it sounds, the groom of the stool, the person who assisted the king during bathroom time, was one of the highest-ranked officials in the royal household. His job included helping the king use the toilet, managing royal finances, controlling access to the monarch, recording the king's digestive health in official documents. This position was trusted so deeply that grooms of the stool often became some of the king's closest advisors. So yes, in the Middle Ages, a man who literally handled the king's toilet affairs held more political power than many nobles. Why was this role so important? Because the king was constantly vulnerable during these moments. The groom of the stool had to be someone the king could trust completely, someone who wouldn't betray him, poison him, or assassinate him. Over time, the role evolved into a broader position of financial management and political counsel. Henry VIII's groom of the stool, Sir Henry Norris, was one of his most influential courtiers. He controlled access to the king, managed massive sums of money, and held immense sway over royal decisions. So while the job started in the bathroom, it ended in the throne room. 6. People really believed sneezing was dangerous. Today, sneezing is a harmless reflex. But in medieval times, it was seen as a moment when evil spirits could enter or escape the body. Some believed a sneeze could expel part of your soul. A powerful sneeze could literally kill you. Demons could slip into your nose during a sneeze. This is why blessings, God bless you, became common. It wasn't politeness, it was a spiritual defense. People also carried herbs, spices, or perfumed cloths to sniff during sneezing fits, hoping to ward off wandering spirits. It sounds wild, but in a world without understanding of germs or allergies, sneezing truly seemed supernatural. The fear was amplified during plague outbreaks, when sneezing was often an early symptom of deadly illness. A single sneeze in a crowded room could spark panic, prayers, and immediate isolation. Some medieval texts even recommended specific prayers to recite after sneezing, treating it like a spiritual emergency rather than a biological reflex. 7. Bread was used as a plate, and sometimes as a poison detector. Medieval nobles often ate off trenchers, which were thick, stale pieces of bread carved into flat discs. Food was placed on top, and after the meal, the trencher was either eaten, fed to the poor, or given to dogs. But there was a darker side. Some people believed that if food was poisoned, the bread would change color or texture. This was due to old legends claiming certain types of poison would react with yeast or wheat. Of course, this method was far from reliable, but the fear of assassination was real, especially for nobles. So using bread as both a plate and a poison test was surprisingly common. Trenchers also served a social function. After feasts, leftover trenchers soaked with meat, juices, and sauces were given to the poor waiting outside. It was a form of charity that reinforced the social hierarchy. The rich ate first, and the poor received the leftovers. This practice was so ingrained that it influenced medieval architecture. Many banquet halls had designated doors where servants would pass used trenchers out to beggars. So bread wasn't just food, it was a plate, a poison detector, and a symbol of medieval class structure. 8. Butter was once banned by the church. In the Middle Ages, eating butter during Lent was strictly forbidden in many regions. This created a strange situation where entire countries were desperate for dairy, but the church prohibited it. So the church created a solution: butter permits. You could pay a fee to legally consume butter during fasting season. Entire towns revolted against these restrictions, while others paid enormous sums simply to keep using butter in cooking. This rule became so influential that it helped fund major cathedrals, including additions to some of Europe's most famous churches. Something as ordinary as butter became a matter of religion, politics, and economics. The most famous example is the Butter Tower of Rouen Cathedral in France, reportedly financed by butter permit fees. The church's logic was that fasting meant abstaining from animal products, but butter was so essential to Northern European cooking that people were willing to pay rather than give it up. This created a lucrative revenue stream for the church and sparked debates about whether religious rules should be negotiable for a price. 9. Medieval towns had night watchmen who acted like time police. Before modern police forces existed, medieval towns used watchmen who patrolled the streets at night. Their job wasn't just to catch criminals, it was to enforce curfew. When the church bells rang at dusk, people were expected to stay indoors. If you were found wandering at night, the watchman could arrest you, question you, escort you home, report you to local authorities. Being outside after dark was seen as suspicious. Only criminals, spies, or supernatural beings were believed to roam at night. For ordinary people, nighttime wasn't freedom. It was danger. Watchmen carried lanterns, bells, and staffs. They would call out the time throughout the night, both to reassure citizens and to signal that they were on duty. In some towns, watchmen also doubled as firefighters, since wooden buildings made nighttime fires catastrophic. The curfew system reinforced social control and kept order in crowded medieval cities where crime, disease, and unrest were constant threats. 10. Medieval people bathed much more than we think. One of the biggest myths about the Middle Ages is that people never bathed. But historical evidence shows that medieval Europeans often washed regularly, even weekly. Bathhouses were extremely popular in cities. Many had private rooms, warm water, and even herbal oils. Some bathhouses resembled early spas, where people ate, socialized, and relaxed. So, where did the dirty medieval people myth come from? 2 reasons. The church later discouraged bathhouses because they became associated with immoral behavior. Plagues and wars eventually made communal bathing less common. But during much of the Middle Ages, bathing was normal, even fashionable. Medieval bathhouses were social hubs. People conducted business, gossiped, and even held meetings there. Some bathhouses offered services like hair cutting, shaving, and minor medical treatments. Public baths were so common in medieval Paris that there were over 30 bathhouses operating simultaneously. It wasn't until the Renaissance that bathing declined in popularity, partly due to fears that water opened the pores and let disease, in an ironic reversal of medieval hygiene practices. The Middle Ages may seem distant and mysterious, but the truth is far stranger than the myths. People believed in cosmic medicine, held animal court trials, and created entire political careers around the king's toilet. Some of these facts seem hilarious, others are unsettling. But all of them remind us that medieval life was shaped by a mix of faith, fear, superstition, and practical ingenuity. If anything in this video surprised you, let me know in the comments. I read all of them. And if you enjoy learning about the hidden, darker, and stranger side of history, consider subscribing. There are countless more mysteries from the Middle Ages waiting to be uncovered, and we're just getting started.